episode Who Knows of Timeout with Leaders. And Dale, we're going to kick it off by asking you, if you had one superpower, what would you pick?
So my question to you, Dale, is are you ready?
I guess I'm ready.
All right, Ty, are you ready? We got to dust off some rust here.
Never ready, but always. Yeah.
All right. Tyler, who are we taking the timeout with today?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, from the 585 all the way down to the DFW to the northwest corner of Arkansas, we have Dale Sedgwick, the CEO at Hope Initiatives. Dale, thanks for jumping on with Kevin and I, episode Who Knows of Timeout with Leaders. And Dale, we're going to kick it off by asking you, if you had one superpower, what would you pick?
Oh my, a superpower. Gosh, maybe it's just the mood I'm in today, but and this is not a superpower, but it's certainly an important one. I'd probably listen better. I think listening, yeah, it's so important. We get to talking and thinking and doing and running, and do we take the time long enough, often enough to really listen closely? So that would be my superpower.
I love that. I love that. Well, I know where Hope Initiatives is, and you guys are right off the inner loop there. And every day, I don't know how many thousands of cars or people tend to drive right by your building and may not even know where you guys are located. But if Tyler and I gave you an unlimited budget and you could put the largest sign above your organization, what's the one quote or the one daily intention that you would share that everybody drives by and takes something away from? What would that quote be that you would put on the top of your organization?
Wow. This isn't going to be very smooth, but it'd be something along the lines of do something today that makes tomorrow better.
Ooh, love that.
Laying a foundation. Love it, Dale. and then listening all at the same time. And Dale, I want to ask you, if we're making tomorrow better, right? So if us three are going out to brunch this morning, what three other people are you inviting, dead or alive, that us three could take some knowledge from?
Dead or alive? Let's see. I would probably, I'm a faith-based person, so a lot of my answers are going to probably reflect that. So the first one would have to be Jesus. And the second one is probably one of my favorite Bible characters, Daniel. Young man, taken out of his culture, had to really learn a lot, impressed people, had miracles. I mean, just an amazing character, perform miracles rather. And the third one, let's think, maybe probably Condoleezza Rice. I'm not sure if that's a good combination of people, but she's just such an amazing, I find her just an amazing character. Kevin, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to her segment at the recent Global Leadership Summit, but I was just really motivated by it. So I think that would be my threesome.
I love that. Well, that's bound to be a long lunch or long dinner because we got a lot to talk about with those three individuals. That's for
probably
sure.
A serious one, right?
We'll probably be doing a lot more listening than talking at that table. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's what
I wanted to ask, because I think a lot of times we learn a lot from both the music that they listen to, the food that they prefer, the food that they eat, because it is one of those things that breaks down generational differences. It can break down even just by race and ethnicity barriers. What is one song? Tyler and I are riding with you. We're in your back seat. We're going into work. You're getting ready for a big meeting, a big initiative. What song might we catch Dale turning up a little louder as she pulls into the parking lot?
That's a hard one, because I listen to either gospel or it's smooth jazz.
Ooh, like both.
And the smooth jazz they don't have a lot of words. It just has a lot of cool tones. Let's see. I don't even know. I don't know what that would be. Like, one of my favorite Christian songs is called Alleluia. Really, really pretty. It's just a worship song. And so that kind of just motivates me. I used to like to run too. Let's see, if I do walk or run, I just listen to smooth jazz songs for the most part.
I love that.
Well, there was one other song I'm trying to think of. I know what it is. It's Not Over. So good motivational song. Ooh. It's a Christian song, but it's called It's Not Over. That one that's a good reminder and a good hopeful one, and a kind of keep on going even though it's tough,
I love
kind of a
that.
song.
Yeah. I think music has that way of kind of going back to emotions. We have almost an emotional response. My wife works in a lot of dementia care, and it's funny, or not ironic almost of sorts, that they can listen to a song and it snaps them right back into that place that they heard it last, or those vivid memories that they have and listening to that song or what it meant to them. So it's pretty powerful stuff. I want to kind of jump right in because you've brought up faith. We talked about before we got on the power of reflection and looking backwards, because we're always trying to move forwards. And you say the music, your gospel music, the belief, your faith carries you forward almost every single day. Can you talk about that? Because I know I know you guys have an affiliation of sorts with religion. But how do you find that balance in that line, right? Because then are we over politicizing it? Are we forcing religion and faith on individuals? But it is kind of the lessons that we're learning every week or every weekend. How do you make that show up in your leadership?
That's a really good question. So I guess I don't see it as, it's certainly not something that you force on anyone. I think the best way to bring it into an environment is to live it. Just to be, who you are. If that's who you are, then be who you are. And it shows up, if you think about, I see the Bible as very, very practical. And so if you think about practical things like working hard for what you get, for being a person who's honest, who respects others, who genuinely cares about other people, person of integrity, just the things that you would like, I think, probably, the way you'd want to treat someone and the way you'd want to be treated. Those are just really basic, fundamental, practical things. And so I think if you understand those things, and if you're diligent and consistent about practicing them and treating others with respect and treating others with kindness and being compassionate towards them and empathetic towards them and trying to figure out how you can help and so forth, you're living the Bible in many ways. You're living it. And so I don't think it's one of these things we have to say, okay, who am I going to be today? Am I going to be this faith-based person today, or am I going to be the real me? Well, it ought to be the real you. So you ought to bring it. And if you live it out, then, I think it becomes its own attraction, if you will. And so, either people will want to know more and you can share more, or they won't. But they would have benefited, hopefully, by you being who you are.
That might be the first time I've ever heard the Bible referred to as practical, because I think sometimes we can get so caught up in the old language that it's hard to translate to today. But I loved how you kind of use common similarity of traits and soft skills that we've talked about as really the lessons that they are trying to pass on. And it's a reason why this book has been around for how many years. And I think it's the power of storytelling and really allowing people to kind of envision themselves in a similar situation and how they would potentially handle it or could handle it.
Right. Dale, appreciate that. I want to ask you, Dale, so what are you doing today to be better at tomorrow? Like you said, what's your action on that billboard that you were talking about?
You're going to make me say live what I said, huh? What am I doing to make tomorrow better? Oh boy. What am I being intentional about today? Well, very, very small thing today. We have a fairly kind of it's interesting week for us here. We have a just filled in position that's been open for a while. And so if I can do something to acclimate her better into the organization and get her started faster and genuinely welcome her, here properly and so forth, then that'll certainly make tomorrow here a lot better. I think what I really like about Hope Initiatives, though, is that that's kind of our business, is to try to do something today that helps to have other people's tomorrows be better. And so we have a workforce development program whereby we provide both employability skills, some of the things I just mentioned, how to be reliable, how to show up on time, how to be respectful, how to develop some coping skills so that you're not always calling out and so forth. And so we try to teach those basic skills as well as basic woodworking and welding and things of that nature. So combination of skills that individuals can take with them. And the idea is to get them from a dependency on social services just for basic necessities to where they are employable, And not just at the, oh, I saw a sign at my favorite fast food yesterday, although I hate working in fast food, I'm just going to do that because I need money. But think about what you really like to do and try to get, connect them with employment that is associated with something they really enjoy so they can begin a career and not just get the next, available job that they'll have for maybe 6 weeks or less. And so that's what we do. And so if we do that at all, then we are certainly helping someone, to have a better tomorrow than they're having right now.
Awesome, Dale, and I love that. Like, and what's your approach on kind of uncovering what people really want to do? Because I think that's one of the biggest tools in life. Like when you start doing what you really want to do, problems seem to go away.
They do. You're more likely to stick it out. No job is gonna be wonderful every day. Every job has its tough days. It's I don't want to be here days. You're just gonna have those. But I'm convinced that if it's in an area, if it's something that you don't mind doing, you kind of like to do, then you're gonna stick it out. Beyond those days versus throw up your hands and walk away at the first instance of frustration. So to help people figure it out, one of the things that we have is this little card game, actually. And it's one of those things when you start with, 200 cards and you go, okay, whittle this down to 100, throw out the ones that there's nowhere in the world you'd want to do and keep the ones that, well, maybe not so bad. And then you go from 100 to 50 to, eventually you're down to maybe 5 things that you would really, that you really think describe you. And so that's just one kind of a fun way to do it, because it forces you gradually to really hone in on what do I really, really like.
But I think you even presenting in that game, the 200 different opportunities, what individual even sees 200 different opportunities for themselves, right? So and you're also thinking creatively for them and probably giving them a lot of ideas that they may have never even thought of as a potential opportunity for themselves. So I absolutely love that. And I kind of go back to your career versus job. I mean, and that's kind of what we've been seeing and discussing with the Great Resignation, the war for talent, all of these types of things are really, as society is trying to determine, what am I willing to spend my time on in exchange for what? And I think we're starting to hear the word career instead of a job, and what a career really means to the individual and how you can create a job around that high potential. But I love what you talked about is to help them kind of see a different avenue for themselves other than fast food. How does your team kind of articulate, what opportunities are outside of the 200, right? The 200 within that card game. But how do you get them thinking more global? Because I think the challenge right now in a lot of organizations, when they talk about workforce development, there's a lot of assumptions and presumptions made as to why these individuals haven't found a job or a career that they enjoy. Is it lack of knowledge? Is it lack of accountability? All those little soft skills. But what have you found standing in the way the most of individuals kind of taking that next step to find their career? And how do you enable them to see that vision for themselves?
It's a hard thing to do. And I don't know that we've mastered it. And the reason is, and the thing that's in the way the most is that they want money and they need it now, and so there's an urgency that says, I have to do something and I have to do it now. Otherwise I'm not gonna eat tomorrow, or I'm not gonna have transportation, or, I'm not gonna be able to take care of my kid. And so trying to get someone to be still long enough to learn and to invest in their future when they're facing those kinds of pressures is extremely difficult. And so we try to find ways, through for the stipends, which every organization does, and so forth, ways to try to bridge some of those gaps. And while we get them motivated and excited about what a future could be. And in some cases, you have to remind individuals, you're saying that, oh no, I can't stay here and learn because I need to go get some money. Well, why are you here? You're here because as of yesterday, you're not working, you're not doing something you want to do, you're not able to take care of your needs. And so we're asking you to invest, a fairly short period of time in yourself so that a month from now or 6 months from now, you're not where you are today. So how do we, so we try to help them bridge the gap practically. and then really try to help them to start shifting the mindset from it just I have it today, it's gone today, to okay, I am building today for tomorrow. And not easy
that
to
action
do.
Towards building, right, is like these little steps. And I love how you put it, be still long enough, right? And when we're talking about being still, I think it's kind of touching on what Tyler and I and you were talking about before we hit record today, was reflection, right? You're not even still long enough to reflect as to where you are and how you got to where you are, and what lessons that you actually learned from those challenges, those wins, those losses. How can we determine as to where we want to go next? And talk to me about reflection. Is that a common practice that you have found most beneficial? Because let's face it, you came from Kodak and Xerox, and now you're leading a nonprofit. So I'm sure there's a lot of reflection that Dale does. But how do you reflect, and then how do you encourage others to take that pause or take that time to reflect themselves to build back better, essentially?
Yep. And so it is an extremely important characteristic. It's just something that we try to have our trainees take the time to do. I think for them, and for anyone else, it's really important to stop and recognize that even if you're not where you really want to be today, you've done something good in your background. You're here. And so there are some things that you've learned that are valuable to you, things that you've learned that you can build upon and improve upon. There are things that you can apply. There are things that you'll never do again, because you've learned a lesson. And so that it kind of remember the quote well. It's one of the things that I remember Condoleezza Rice saying during her speech at the Global Leadership Summit recently. I think she said something along the lines of, everybody has a past. Everybody, you should own your mistakes or own your past, but you don't become a prisoner to it. And so I think it's that, stepping back and appreciating what you've done, where you've come from, even if it wasn't wonderful. You learned something, you developed some strength, you developed some courage. You're probably, maybe you are, you have more empathy than you you did, or something like that, because of your own experiences. And so that reflection is so important. And for me, I probably don't do it often enough because, like I said, I'm running. One of the biggest differences, obviously, came from two very, very large companies in my history to one that now has about 15 people. So whatever gets done, you better be willing to roll up your sleeves and help it get done. And so there isn't an awful lot of time to reflect. But in doing that, you realize that, wow, I learned an awful lot along the way that will allow me to even roll up my sleeves and do some of the things that need to be done here. So it works whether you are, like I said, running and gunning every day, or whether you think you're running from your past. It's just a good idea to stop, embrace it, reflect, and learn what you learned. Understand what you learned and what you gained, and figure out how to apply it. Or avoid the same mistake, whichever the case may be.
That too.
Yeah. Definitely.
And Dale, what would you say you took from Xerox and Kodak? What and I got to know, how was Rochester back in the day? Let's just skip what you learned. How was it in 1979 when they had 99.9% share of the market? What was driving down Park Avenue like, or what was was downtown hopping?
Well, in its own way, it was hopping. It was it's funny because when I first moved here, I thought, wow, there's really not a bad section of town, because most people were working, and you could see, the neighborhoods really, from my perspective, they really weren't that bad. And like I said, people were working, and because you had Kodak, you had Xerox, you had GM, you had all these companies, and it seemed that everybody had a job, and therefore everybody had some hope. Everybody was able to go out. I used to go to our little nightclubs. It was interesting. They used to go one behind the other. They used to open up here. Everybody was there. Then it would shut down, and everybody shifted over here. But it was fun. It was honestly a lot of fun, to just go out and enjoy yourself. You felt safe. And, you saw kind of the same people, and it was just a fun time. It was great, actually. But it's a very, it was, I was a lot younger too, so I could hang out much later.
And were you in that big building that looks like a Gotham City?
I wasn't for,
Batman building?
I was in when I was at Kodak, it was in Kodak office, and it's so funny because I sit here and I can literally look out of my window and see where I started my career. I literally see Kodak office out of my window,
Well, that's
and so
good.
it feels like almost like full circle. And then
Yeah.
if I look hard enough the other way, I can probably see Xerox Square. And so yes, I was in that big granite building for a long time. Um, but yeah, you had help, you had support. I mean, I really appreciate, especially I spent 31 years at Xerox, and so I really appreciate that they just took the time to reinforce whether it's leadership skills, managerial skills, sales skills, whatever the case may be, whatever your job called for. They took the time and spent the money to help develop their people, and you can never invest too much, I think, in people development. So
Never.
I appreciate that.
Never. I want to go back to when we're on the streets back in 79, 80, 81, whatever year it is. But
yeah,
Dale, did you get a sense of, because everybody was working and you felt safe, did you feel like a greater sense of community in Rochester at that point in time comparatively to what you see today?
Yeah, and I don't know whether the change is it's me as I've gotten older or whether it's the community, to be honest
Yeah.
with you. But I mean, I think I certainly feel that I had a much broader set of friends, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends have moved away, you know, quite honestly, looking for opportunities elsewhere as things here have, have gotten smaller in
Yeah.
terms of just the employment opportunity base. And so definitely a bigger sense of definitely, yeah, a much broader sense of community. You know, there were struggles and challenges then. You know, you had some social injustices. I'm not going to say that it was all wonderful, but there was certainly, I think, a stronger sense of community because you didn't have the same level of fear. I don't believe that we have now, or that we see now.
When you're aligned with a job, right? And let's say it was a job versus a career, but it seems like these organizations made it a career because they continue to develop their teammates, right? And one area that maybe wasn't a fit, you still had the availability to transfer within the same organization, and maybe those skill sets or something that you're more passionate about. But having a job and having that level of safety first allows people to actually have more purpose.
Yeah.
So I feel like it was, everybody felt more safe, and therefore the community itself probably was much stronger from a relationships perspective. And obviously the technology and Facebook and MySpace and all these other things weren't really a thing back then. You had to kind of see each other in passing, or otherwise you lost touch.
That's right.
But I just had to ask, kind of, because we always hear about these glory days of Rochester, and I've only been up here 11 years, and I still think it's a great place comparatively to where I came from. But undoubtedly, I think there's a lot of work in progress that needs to be made. And that kind of gets us to this workforce development push that we've seen in our area. Tyler and I have had conversations with CEOs, and they didn't seem to care about the high school graduation rates, right, for 30 years. But now I have this sense of belief that I bet they wish they had, because now they're seeing that long-term impact and then the availability to qualified talent or individuals that have those particular skills. What have you learned about workforce development? What have you learned about providing opportunities for others that maybe the rest of society has forgotten about? And do you believe that they have the same potential if they're given the same commitment, time, and investment?
So to answer your second question first, I absolutely do. If I didn't believe that they have the same potential, then I couldn't. I
had to lob you a softball there.
Yeah.
Obviously, I believe in myself, but
yeah. So you definitely have to. But I think the reality though is that not everyone. I don't think everyone feels that way. I think what's unfortunate is that a lot of our business community could stand to learn more about the potential that individuals bring, regardless of their backgrounds. And so it's kind of an interesting thing when you step back and think about it. You know, the individuals themselves who would be candidates for a program need to learn that they bring an awful lot to the table, that they have gifts and talents and skills and interests that could be of benefit to their communities, to their families, to society in general. And our employers also need to learn that, you know, your next great employee may come in a package that you didn't envision. And so there's a lot to learn, I think, on both sides in terms of the potential that people have. Again, you have a past, you can't let it be a prison for you. So you've got to break out. You've got to be willing to do things differently. But that applies to our employers as well. I think especially here, because we have had the lack of graduation success for years that we've had and so forth. Bless you.
Thank you.
Lack of graduation success, et cetera, then they're going to have to, I think, open their their arms a little bit broader and be a bit more accepting. And I think, if I think about workforce development programs, it would be wonderful if we could structure them in such a way that it's not just the organization, typically a nonprofit organization or maybe an educational organization, trying to develop individuals and then present them to companies. Would it be wonderful if companies came alongside and they were kind of our partner in helping to develop individuals? You know what you want, as a business leader, a business owner, business executive, or whatever, what you're looking for, the kinds of skills and talents. And so, kind of come alongside and support and lend your expertise and lend your ear and your help to, to develop individuals. And so that then you benefit because you've got a pool of candidates that you would not have ordinarily had.
That's the best idea I've heard towards workforce development, and something that I talk about often because it's a common challenge and a common problem. The hard part is organizations getting over their own egos that they need to work with a competitor. But now it's a sheer lack of available individuals. I think at the last stat that I saw, there are 1.9 jobs available to qualified candidates. It's going to continue to be a numbers problem, but is that going to be an excuse, or does that become a challenge, therefore an opportunity to look at this differently? And my question to you, because you came from Xerox, you came from Kodak, you understand how a lot of these businesses make business decisions, and like it or not, it's typically a financial decision. And I've gone down the workforce development path that growing and developing talent is always going to be cheaper in the long run for an organization than buying talent that somebody else developed. Right. How do we change their perception that there is massive potential in these pockets or pools of talent that they haven't thought about before? How do we change that perception that there is potential? Almost like an NFL team. They know that if they don't give that player the strength and conditioning coach, the quarterback coach, running back coach, they don't give those the additional training and development they need, that potential might be great, but it may never be developed. How do we change that perception that there are individuals that are ready to work, have massive amounts of potential? We just need to give them these opportunities.
So a couple of thoughts come to mind. One thing that we try to do is work with what we call employer partners. And so these are employers who are, in fact, willing to embrace a population that they may not have been willing to embrace before. For example, individuals who may have been previously incarcerated. And so if we can work with them, identify individuals, that meet our standards, and then have them hire those individuals, give us permission to check back, check in, maybe coach and counsel with that person. Seems like they're not following the path they should be following and so forth before they just walk them out the door. They'll eventually get success. And I think that brings to the second one, is that we just have to have some successes. And I think that, if our partners are successful as they work closely with us, then they can become the voice and the example to their peers, in their industries.
Nobody wants to be first unless it's in a gold medalist race, right? It seems like with some of these things.
Nobody wants to,
Nobody wants to be the guinea pig, but again, I think what you said before is if they aren't included with the creation of the solution, with the creation of the development, and you're just doing the development as a nonprofit, that organization, unfortunately, because they didn't have control or the sense that they had any control, it gives them something to blame or point fingers to. So I love that methodology of including them, because then it's a shared responsibility of that individual's success. Ty, what do you got?
And Dale, I'm over here scrolling through your history over here, and I just got to know, out of all these positions, what was the most fun position? I mean, we got VP of Business Development, VP of Industry Marketing, systems analyst, sales, marketing, and product launch. What was like the coolest product you ever launched at Xerox? Like, what was like the big?
So probably the coolest product were the very first office-sized multifunction devices that were launched in the United States. And that was cool because nobody had used them. So this was the beginning of your one device that can scan, fax, copy, print.
Ooh.
And so bringing just that new technology to the marketplace, I was, not the product development, but bringing that to the marketplace, that was fun because it was new and it was different. And,
Did you have to keep it like down low where you like, could you tell your family about this thing?
I probably did tell them. I knew that it was so new that they weren't going to be able to tell maybe other people about it at all. So there was no risk there whatsoever. Like, it does what? So.
I have heard about these copier glory days. I used to work at Toshiba Business Solutions, and it had been so many years since obviously that first product got the multi-function printer got released, and it was amazing to me on how many copiers continue to be the complaint in the office. Especially nobody cared about what copier they had unless it went down that day and needed service or toner. But how much that just piece of technology evolved over time. And here I was working for Toshiba, and you start to really learn about how this whole industry was created. So that had to be very, very exciting to be on the cutting edge of that. What was one of the greatest lessons, I guess, you learned about being at Xerox? Because from afar, I guess we've heard that you also had the mouse. You also had some of these other pieces of technology that Xerox never cared to, I guess.
Yeah. PC, mouse, Ethernet. I mean, the list is really, really long.
It's long.
The mouse.
Yeah, the mouse. Yeah. Steve Jobs, I think, actually took it from them when they were out in California. Xerox had a little incubation center, like technology center.
The folks who run Adobe today, I think, were ex-Xerox people, if I'm not mistaken, who run, for PDFs, documents. I mean, it's such a staple. And
So what leadership lesson lies within those misses or massive misses or viewed as potential massive misses from a business perspective or market opportunity?
Yeah. So books have been written on this. What do they say? I guess from my perspective, it's being willing to shift. I think a lot of times you have something golden in your hands, but because you've done things the same a certain way for so long, then you don't recognize the potential that you have in order to to really create something new, create a new market, create new ways of doing things. And so you have to. It's I think a culture that at the time just didn't really shift, didn't want to shift. I think the same thing was true of Kodak. Just in terms of embracing digital photography, felt that film was here to stay, didn't shift. It was great. We're doing well. And this is, we're the best at it. So why do we need to do something different and potentially destroy ourselves? And so, that kind of fear of destroying yourself is a very dangerous thing, because if you don't do it and remake, then someone else is going to do it for you. And so I think both companies learned that lesson.
Which is fascinating to really just even think about, because they had to be innovative, outside the box, and creative and entrepreneurial in order to create this market share.
Exactly, to begin with.
Correct. And it's almost like we write out the entrepreneurialism within the organization through policies and procedures. We almost write that out of the organization to continue to keep that golden goose of sorts. Otherwise, that golden goose, as hearing you say, becomes bronze over time if you're unwilling to develop and innovate and recreate and reimagine.
Right. So, exactly.
Fascinating.
Yep. Got to reimagine.
Yeah, Dale. And Dale, you keep talking about how fast you're running over there. And I always ask how, when because you don't get to where you're at without being consistent and having endurance, right? Like, what are some best practices for you keeping yourself so consistent, and how do you keep this endurance up?
I think the common denominator probably is just doing something that you're really passionate about doing. If I didn't care about the people we serve, if I didn't care about the people who work here, it would be, I think, a lot harder to keep the endurance up. But because I care, you don't want to disappoint. You want to see things get better for them. We intentionally, when we have opportunities, try to hire individuals whose backgrounds may have been struggles for them, who reflect those we're trying to serve. And so, I don't want them to to go backwards. I don't want them to not have their, the best days they can have at work. I don't want to mishandle the organization and have them, miss an opportunity or what have you. And so just being passionate about what we're doing and genuine about the folks that we work with, that we have here as employees as well as those we serve. I think I know that's the motivation for each day.
Love it. And Dale, what book are you reading right now? I see some books behind you. What's on the docket?
Yeah, none of those. I am. Let's see. What am I reading? So I'm reading a couple of books. For the, I think everyone in America has read this book except for me. It's called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Yep. And so maybe because I'm getting older and nearing retirement one of these days, I'm thinking maybe I should figure something out if it's not too late. So I'm reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Really interesting read. I'm also reading a book. It's called Vegucation Over Medication. And it's by Dr. Bobby Price. And he, so just, as you get older, you start thinking more. It's begun to think more about diet, maybe because I look in the mirror and go, "Whoa, what happened here? I can't wear those jeans anymore. Why?" But you think about what you're eating and what you're consuming, and so this one is all about being plant-based and so forth, but doing it in a way that you can actually maintain. So you may have to throw some meat in there every now and then, but it's a really interesting book, very interesting.
Poor Dad, Rich Dad's pretty awesome, right? I love how he had his kids like work jobs that they didn't like on purpose. Yeah, and then he doesn't even count like having a house like an asset. He just has a total different
Isn't that amazing? Like your house is not an what? What do you mean it's not an asset? How is that a liability? Yeah. Totally different spin on things. Yeah. So cool. I'm enjoying that.
I think, and I want to go back to the workforce development program. So I'm going to take us way back in the conversation because I'm giddy to ask. But you mentioned like they need the money now. And I think each individual kind of has that Maslow's hierarchy of needs always sticks out to me. But if safety and security isn't first, how do we expect individuals to be capable or able to learn? And that was something that I saw at Leadership Rochester when I went from the Norman, or where the heck was Edison Tech, and then I went to oh my God, one of the parochial schools or Howard School. And just seeing the vast differences between the student experience. Some students obviously at Edison had to go through metal detectors and kind of almost that looking over your shoulder continuously. You can't really look forward as to even what the teacher is presenting or sharing to attempt to learn. And then you go to this other organization or school that didn't have a security guard. There was no metal detectors, and they had all these creative programs for the students. Their STEM program was out of this world. I mean, I almost wanted to go back to school. But that was the clearest difference in perspective that I needed to so clearly see that in the absence of safety, learning is never going to be present. Is that something that you have started to see in this workforce development, that people need those nutrients on the front end in order to be able to be developed into their full potential?
Yeah, it's so you definitely see it, and you definitely hear the stories. We have people come in whose relatives have had a relative to get killed, or they go home and they know they're going to maybe hear gunshots and things of that nature in their neighborhood. We've had employees who've had loved ones to lose their lives, and so how do you learn? And so the first thing is that you do have to pause and allow the person to try to heal or cope emotionally with what they have experienced. And it is a lifestyle, because knowing you may hear gunshots, or you may see someone being chased by the police and so forth. I mean, you don't see that every day in every neighborhood, right? But yet there are many neighborhoods where that's just simply the norm. And so you realize that people may come having had a really bad night, having experienced something really, really troublesome. And so you try to be as compassionate and patient as you can possibly be. But you also try to encourage them and remind them that changing their future and that of their family is one of the reasons they're here. Because you do want to try to be a person who makes your community better. Then I don't know that I'm kind of torn in terms of you try to encourage a person to leave their community, because then that doesn't help. That community just ends up being even worse if those who have some hope and some stability and so forth, that they all leave, then that's really bad. And so I don't know that it's always about leaving the community versus having a greater percentage of the people in the community who are trying to do the right thing, and therefore, have that community improve over time. But you do have to remind them that that reality is one of the reasons that their own development is so important, because they can in turn have a positive impact on their family and on their community.
So that's something I've ever really thought about. It's kind of like get out, to change. But if you get out, then it's like, do you get out? Like you said, that's a torn, right?
It's torn. You're torn. You want to equip them to get out if they want to, but then you don't want But then what are you leaving? That's not good. That's not good. So somebody has to stay and help it improve, I think. So, that ends up being, I think, you leave that as a personal decision. So you have the opportunity. You have the opportunity to stay and make better. You have the opportunity to go. But the bottom line is that you have an opportunity and you can choose. So.
Hope keeps coming up, and it's in the organization's name, Dale. But hope to you is the belief in tomorrow can be better, even going back to your quote. How have you found when the world seems small for some individuals who have never had the privilege of leaving their city block, even just downtown Rochester, even to really even give them a sense of hope? How do you inspire them? How do you give them? How do you enable their ability to have hope?
Really good question. How do we do that? In some cases, I think you mentioned you mentioned storytelling earlier, and so sometimes it's being able to look at the lives of individuals, practical individuals, because not everybody's going to grow up and be the the Michael Jordan of whatever their area is or what have you. But what are some of the practical examples of individuals who may have started small, started poor? So use yourself as an example. I can certainly use myself as an example of someone who grew up in a very poor neighborhood and no longer live in a very poor neighborhood. So I guess I left. But you can, but telling those choices, those opportunities, but telling stories, being able to just use examples, examples from our lifetime, lots of biblical examples, always getting them to see something bigger than themselves. I mean, that's always a source of hope when it's about more than just what you're going to do for yourself tomorrow. That gets old really quickly. And so, helping individuals, first of all, to take care of themselves, but then be able to take care of other things that are bigger than themselves as well, or be a part of something that's bigger than you.
I love that. And I kind of want to go back to, because everybody talks about self-reflection, and some people find it very difficult to reflect, right? To ask themselves questions. I had to partner with I had to realize who I was hanging out with, right? If I was hanging out with six idiots, I was going to be the seventh, right? I wasn't going to be the smartest of the six, right? And that's kind of what led me to Tyler and led me to some other mentors and peers that I have, and that's kind of what you've created, is that foundation. You have other people that have lived and come from a similar experience. And that's why AA works. I think sometimes if we're only getting advice from somebody that doesn't have the same background, it becomes almost unbelievable or not relatable. So I love how you kind of made that initiative there at Hope to inspire seeing a future for themselves and thinking differently as to what their potential even is on their own.
I just think it's cool that you give them something to look at, Dale. When you write something down on a piece of paper, it's real. But when you see someone doing it, it's like really real for them.
Right.
And Kevin and I, we interviewed a fellow that made it to the NBA a while back, named Shan Foster, doing some great things in Nashville. And he had a comment. He was just like, I needed to see someone do it great, like in hoops or anything. I just needed to see it done. Sure that, TV's TV, but if you just get to see it, I think that gives somebody a little extra, I don't know, pep in their step, or just a reality. And
Right.
it's just almost the same as writing it down. It's just, it becomes something that you can see, and it's a doable. And Dale, I wasn't going to try to make light of any situation right now, but I'm pretty hungry right now, and I've been eating for about 3.5 days. Before this call, I was like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go do something bad. What do you suggest? What's a healthy lunch for you nowadays from your book that you're reading? When you're like perturbed, not perturbed, but it's like, I really want a double cheeseburger right now. But,
Stop talking. No. Yes, I so want to go to the pub in Webster and get a smokehouse burger that has, the hamburger, the cheese, and the onions, but I can't do it.
You call it good fat, right?
Yeah, so my healthy lunch these days is a salad.
Okay.
With all kinds of good veggies and so forth in it. That's my healthy lunch. But yes, so over the weekend I decided to cheat. I decided to seriously cheat, and so I went to a restaurant in Webster, and they had something I'd never had before. It's called raclette. You might know, maybe you know what it is, but RACLETTE, raclette. And it basically, it's like, oh my gosh, these are like my favorite things right here in one dish. And it's basically they're fresh cut and fried potatoes with cheese drizzled all over them. It's like potato chips melted. So it's not like a nacho. It's totally different from a nacho, but it's like a tower. It's JoJo's in Webster, if you want to know. But it's
I might have to check that out, Dale.
Man, oh my gosh, it was so good.
What?
That was
Is it kind of like scallop potatoes, sort of like?
Well, so they're probably shaped in about the thickness of scallop potatoes, but they're fried. So this is all the way unhealthy. These are fried. They're like potato chips with cheese.
Oh boy!
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
Sounds like a good weekend activity for myself to try.
Oh my goodness! Yeah. Definitely not a daily thing, but I think anyone deserves to cheat every now and then. I recommend it. It was good.
Yeah, and I've been reading this Sad Guru fella for a while, this engineering guy, and he has a whole thing on eating, where it's just like your body. All it takes is 15 minutes of eating anything, and you're pretty much full. And no kidding, I tried it the other day with freaking broccoli and like something else, and the guy was right. Like just the art of it, the activity of it. Wow. It's just for me. It's just that initiative, that first doing the right thing at the front end, and then I'm good. Like even at a restaurant, if I order healthy, just get the menu away from me. It's over.
I know. Yeah.
But awesome, Dale. Well,
too funny. Well, yeah, I just have one question because Dale kept bringing up intention, and Tyler, a big intention. We hear intentionality. We hear setting a daily intention. If I was to ask Dale what your daily intention is as an individual, as a spouse, as a mother, as a grandmother, whatever it might be, what is that daily intention that you repeat to yourself as you're stepping out of bed in the morning?
So as a faith-based person, I'm going to answer it from that perspective. My intention at the end of the day is to hear God say, well done, my good and faithful servant.
Wow.
That is my intention.
Wow. Love that. Well, we got to end on the high note because that was absolutely exceptional. Dale, I just want to say thank you so much for the work that you're doing in our community to help develop those forgotten about individuals, because they have all the potential in the world. It just takes somebody to have a little belief. I so appreciate not only your leadership, but what you're really doing to raise up the community in which we all live and work here in Rochester. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to share.
Yeah, this is fun, Dale. Thank you. Raclette coming in hot.
Raclette, yeah. Remember it.